Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. Olivia stood in front of the vanity mirror, carefully pinning a golden brooch shaped like a heart to her navy blue blouse. It had been 5 years since she married Axel, and this year she wanted their anniversary to be special. For weeks she'd planned surprises, custom vows she had written, his favorite dishes she had secretly learned to cook, and a scrapbook of their memories. But that morning, Axel had shocked her with a bigger gesture. "I've planned something too," he said, flashing his well-worn smile. "We're going to the sea. I've chartered a private boat, just you and me." Olivia's eyes widened with joy. "You did?" she whispered, hugging him tightly. "You've been so distant lately, I thought you forgot." He held her, but his arms felt rigid. She didn't notice. She only saw the man she fell in love with. To her, this meant reconciliation. To Axel, it meant finality. As they arrived at the private dock, the warm coastal breeze tousled Olivia's curls, and she breathed in deeply. "It's beautiful," she whispered, her eyes fixed on the golden horizon. Axel nodded, leading her gently aboard. The boat swayed softly, the ocean singing its quiet lullaby. Olivia didn't notice Clara, dressed in white, watching them board from a parked car nearby. As the boat pulled away, Axel poured them wine. "To us," she toasted, "to new beginnings." He smiled faintly, clinking glasses. For a while, she talked endlessly about their first date, how much she missed his laugh, and how she hoped they could try for a baby soon. Axel nodded through it all, but his eyes were elsewhere, calculating. "Come to the edge," he said as the sun began to set. "Let's take a picture against the light." Olivia giggled, brushing her hair back. "You finally want photos with me again?" she teased. She stood at the edge, arms open, heart full. He stepped behind her, and for a second, the world stopped. Then, with a single push, everything changed. Her scream tore through the air as her body hit the sea. Axel stepped back, breathing heavily. The water swallowed her whole, and with a practiced calm, he tossed her scarf after her. "Goodbye, Olivia," he muttered, walking back to the deck alone. The waves crashed gently against the hull of the boat, as if unaware of the silence that had suddenly gripped the deck. Axel stood motionless, watching the spot where Olivia had disappeared. Her scream had been brief, swallowed by the roar of the sea and the open emptiness around them. He didn't rush to throw a life vest. He didn't shout her name. Instead, he pulled out his phone, took a deep breath, and dialed. "This is Captain Axel," he said, feigning panic. "My wife, she slipped. She fell overboard." His voice cracked on cue, and he dropped to his knees, clutching the edge of the boat. But there were no tears, just silence, calculation, and the ticking of his expensive wristwatch. Somewhere far off, Olivia's hands fought against the water, but her voice was gone, her vision blurred, and her heart broken long before her body was ever pushed. Clara waited on shore at the villa Axel had secretly rented under her name. When the call came through, she smirked as she poured herself a glass of wine. "Is it done?" she asked. Axel's voice was low. "She's gone," he replied, glancing back toward the sea. No one saw, no cameras, nothing. Clara's heels clicked against the marble floor as she turned toward the large glass window overlooking the sea. "Then it's just us now," she whispered. Back on the boat, Axel rehearsed his grief. He loosened his shirt, tousled his hair, and practiced panicked expressions in the reflection of his wine glass. When the Coast Guards arrived 30 minutes later, he collapsed dramatically into their arms. "She slipped," he shouted. "She stood too close to the edge. I told her to be careful." The officers searched the waters until dusk, but found only Olivia's floating scarf. "There's still hope," one of them said. Axel nodded, jaw clenched. But in his heart, he already knew. Olivia wasn't coming back, at least, not the way they imagined. The news of Olivia's disappearance spread like wildfire. Within 48 hours, the media was flooded with headlines. "Businesswoman feared dead in boat tragedy." Axel sat before the cameras, eyes dimmed by artificial tears. "She was the love of my life," he said hoarsely, holding Olivia's photo in one hand and her scarf in the other. "We had plans. She wanted children." The nation mourned with him. Neighbors brought food. Friends whispered prayers. Even strangers lit candles. But no one knew that just beneath his suit jacket, his phone buzzed constantly with messages from Clara. "Soon," she had written, "soon you'll be free." Axel played the grieving husband well, too well. His sobs at the vigil drew praise. His silence at the memorial stirred sympathy. But in the darkness of their bedroom, where Olivia once slept, he now curled beside Clara. "They believe me," he whispered. "They really do." Clara blended into Olivia's life like dye in water. Within 3 weeks, she had moved into Olivia's house under the guise of offering support. Olivia's mother, still in shock, welcomed her warmly. "Olivia adored you like a sister," she said. Clara smiled faintly. "And I adored her." But when alone, Clara strutted barefoot through the halls, opening drawers, trying on jewelry, even lounging on the bed Olivia once made every morning. "This should have been mine all along," she muttered one night as Axel unbuttoned her blouse. "Now it finally is." Axel, however, had changed. The shadows under his eyes grew darker. The alcohol in his breath lingered longer. Guilt wasn't knocking, it was clawing at the door. "I did it for us," he whispered one night, staring blankly at Olivia's portrait. Clara rolled her eyes. "You did it for freedom. Now act like it." But Axel no longer slept soundly. He heard waves in his dreams, saw Olivia's face in mirrors. And at night, the wind carried a sound that chilled him, not screams, but silence. Jonathan stood quietly near the back of the church during Olivia's memorial service, his hands clasped in front of him. He hadn't cried, but not because he wasn't grieving. He simply didn't believe. Something about the entire tragedy felt orchestrated. He'd known Axel since they were boys. Axel had always been ambitious, yes, but never gentle. And Clara? She wasn't even discreet about her affections. Jonathan had once caught them whispering in corners, too close for comfort, months before Olivia's accident. Still, he said nothing then. Now, as he watched Clara grip Axel's arm tightly while the priest offered prayers for Olivia's soul, a knot formed in his stomach. "She never liked boats," Jonathan whispered to himself. Why would she agree to a sea trip? After the service, he approached Axel slowly. "If there's anything I can do," he offered. Axel nodded too quickly. "We're just trying to survive this, man." But Jonathan's eyes remained on Clara, whose fingers never stopped tightening around Axel's. Elsewhere, miles from Lagos, the world remained silent. A young woman with bruises along her spine lay unconscious inside a small fishing cabin on a remote stretch of coast. 2 fishermen, Ade and Cunley, had found her clinging to a wooden plank, her wedding ring still on her swollen finger. "She's not from around here," Cunley whispered as they carried her limp body to the healer woman they called Mama Iredi. "She's not dead either," Ade added, marveling at the weak rise and fall of her chest. Mama Iredi, gray-haired and calm, examined the woman carefully. "The sea tried to take her, but it failed," she murmured. "Let's see if she still wants to live." For days, the woman lay in a dreamless sleep. But her fingers twitched. Her lips whispered a name. And one evening, her eyes flew open, wild, searching, confused. "Who am I?" she rasped. But no one in that room had the answer. Not yet. The days blurred together inside Mama Iredi's hut, where the scent of shea butter and burning herbs lingered in the air. The woman, still without memory, lay on a cot covered in a faded wrapper, her eyes darting with flickers of fear each time she heard the ocean crashing outside. "We found you half dead," Mama Iredi had told her, gently applying ointment to the cuts along her arms. "The sea spit you out. That means your story's not over." The woman often woke screaming at night, choking on her own breath, as if salt water still lived in her lungs. Each time Mama Iredi sat beside her whispering, "Easy now, my child. Breathe. You're safe here." The woman clung to that voice more than any name, for her own name, her past, remained buried in darkness. When asked who she was, she could only shake her head, lips trembling. Weeks passed. The wounds on her body healed faster than the void inside her mind. She began helping Mama Iredi grind herbs and sweep the compound, her body moving out of habit, though she didn't know where the rhythm came from. Sometimes she stared at her own hands, studying the ring that refused to come off. "A husband," Mama Iredi observed one day. "Maybe you're a wife." The woman touched the ring, then her stomach and frowned. "There's a hole in me," she whispered, "like I've lost something, or someone." At night, she scribbled shapes on scraps of paper, fragments of boats, eyes, lips, a man's back turned. "Your memory is like a room locked from the inside," Mama Iredi told her gently. "When you're ready, the door will open." One evening, the woman walked to the edge of the shore, bare feet in the wet sand. The sun was sinking, golden and distant. As she watched the waves, she muttered, "I don't know who I am, but I survived." Behind her, Mama Aredi's voice rose softly. "For now, we'll call you Ariana." Ariana adjusted to her new name like one might to a second skin, awkward at first, but strangely comforting. It gave her a sense of placement in a world that had none. Life in the quiet coastal village was humble, but healing. She learned to cook with firewood, to press palm oil with bare hands, and to laugh softly with the market women who teased her for her beauty and strange silence. Still, inside her lay an ache that grew with the moon's cycle. Sometimes she'd find herself staring at children's shoes at the market, her chest tightening. One day she passed a mirror in a roadside shop and stopped. Her eyes. Something about her own eyes made her back away. "Don't be afraid of yourself," Mama Aredi said, placing a firm hand on her shoulder. "You are more than what you've forgotten." The nightmares returned frequently. In them, Ariana stood on a boat, her arms outstretched, and then a sudden cold, a shove, the taste of betrayal thicker than the sea. She'd wake gasping, tears mixing with sweat. "I feel like I trusted someone," she said once. "Someone I loved, and he tried to kill me." Mama Aredi watched her closely. "Love is not always kindness," she murmured. Ariana nodded slowly. Days turned into months. A wall in Mama Aredi's hut became covered with Ariana's sketches, shards of memories. A man's watch, a luxury villa, a woman with sharp cheekbones. "You were someone," Mama Aredi said one afternoon, examining the drawings. "Someone who once lived a life very different from this one." Ariana looked down at her ink-stained fingers. "I need to remember," she whispered. "Not just for me, but for whoever I left behind." There was no answer to that, but the wind that passed through the trees that evening sounded less like wind, and more like a whisper begging her not to forget. Back in the city, Clara strutted through the expansive mansion once called Olivia's, now redecorated to reflect her taste. Gold-framed mirrors replaced family portraits. Velvet curtains replaced soft cottons. Even the perfume in the bedroom had changed, floral and sharp, not the warm vanilla Olivia used to love. "This is my home now," Clara muttered one morning, sitting in Olivia's old chair. "Everything she had now belongs to me." But beneath the surface, her joy was cracking. Her pregnancy had once felt like a golden rope tying Axel to her. But the rope frayed quickly. Axel had grown distant again, his nights longer, his drinking heavier. "You promised me forever," Clara snapped one evening when he came home reeking of whiskey. "You said we'd be happy once she was gone." Axel, slouched against the doorway, didn't answer right away. He stared at her, eyes bloodshot, lips curled in exhaustion. "I don't sleep anymore," he whispered. "I hear her voice. I see her face in the bathwater." Clara recoiled. "She's dead, Axel." He laughed bitterly. "Then why does it feel like she's not?" That night, while Clara clutched her stomach, her hands trembling from cramps, Axel stood outside on the balcony, chain-smoking. He stared at the street below, where shadows moved too quickly. The pregnancy didn't last. Clara collapsed during dinner 2 weeks later. The doctor said it was stress. Axel said nothing. He didn't hold her hand in the hospital. He didn't look her in the eye. When she returned home, she found Olivia's wedding dress stuffed into a garbage bag in the hallway. "I don't want to see her face again," Axel muttered as he walked past. But what haunted him wasn't the image of Olivia, it was the silence she left behind, so loud it now lived in every room. Ariana was shelling beans on the front step of Mama Aredi's hut when her fingers suddenly froze. The scent of the sea breeze, thick and briny that morning, triggered something unexpected. Her breath hitched. Without realizing it, her hand began to draw across the ground with her finger, first a circle, then a square, and then a man's face. She didn't know why, but she could see his eyes, intense, cold, calculating. The image made her hands tremble. "Mama," she said, her voice small. "There's a man. I think he pushed me. I saw him." Mama Aredi came over slowly, kneeling beside her. "What else do you see?" she asked gently. Ariana touched the ring on her finger. "I remember his hand," she whispered. "It wore the same ring. He smiled when he did it." That night, the nightmares returned stronger. Ariana bolted upright in bed, sweat clinging to her skin. "He left me there," she sobbed. "He meant for me to die." Mama already sat beside her, placing a wooden box in her lap. Inside it lay the scarf they found with her, the ring she wore, and a locket with a tiny photo of Olivia and Axel on their wedding day. Ariana stared at it for what felt like hours. "That's me," she finally said, tears running freely. "My name is Olivia." The name tasted foreign and familiar all at once. She began to cry, not because of the memory itself, but because of the weight of what she'd lost. "He betrayed me," she murmured, voice hollow, "and the world thinks I'm gone." Mama already took her hand. "Then maybe it's time the world finds out otherwise." Olivia, formerly Ariana, closed the box and exhaled deeply. "Not yet," she said. "I want the truth first, all of it. Then, I'll decide what they get to know." Axel adjusted his collar in front of the mirror in his new office, the same office that used to bear Olivia's nameplate just 3 years ago. With falsified documents and a quiet boardroom vote, he had absorbed her company into his own business operations. Visionary, the media now called him. Widowed genius turned tycoon. But behind the title lay desperation. The company's cash flow was erratic. Suppliers were threatening to pull out. Staff turnover was high. Even Clara, once smug and smugly secure, now spent hours pacing. "Why do you always look over your shoulder?" she asked one morning, arms crossed. Axel didn't respond. He had started receiving emails from anonymous senders, cryptic lines like, "You buried more than a body." Each one sent chills down his spine. "It's someone playing games," Clara said. Ignore it. But Axel couldn't, because deep inside, he feared it was more than just a game. Jonathan, meanwhile, sat in his office poring over Axel's financial records. Something didn't add up. Contracts had dates that predated Olivia's accident. Signatures looked off, too perfect, too neat. Then a photo popped up on his screen. It was of Axel and Clara, arms entwined, laughing at a beach resort, taken a week before Olivia's death. The timestamp didn't lie. Jonathan leaned back, jaw tightening. "You really think you fooled all of us?" he muttered. Though he hadn't spoken to Axel in weeks, he began digging quietly, asking questions among old colleagues, pressing the family lawyer who handled Olivia's estate. The more he found, the more his suspicion turned to certainty. Axel hadn't just moved on too fast, he'd orchestrated it all. If Olivia were alive, Jonathan whispered to himself, she'd burn this whole lie to the ground. And somewhere far away, Olivia, sketching the very same office from memory, murmured, "That's exactly what I planned to do." The sun rose high over the city as mourners gathered again, this time not for a vigil, but for a formal memorial. Olivia's name was carved into polished marble now, her photograph framed beside wilting roses. It was a funeral without a body, but to everyone in attendance, it felt final. Axel stood in front of the crowd, wearing black, holding a folded speech. His words were rehearsed, polished, almost poetic. "She was light in a dark world," he said, voice trembling. "I will carry her memory forever." The audience nodded, some teary-eyed, others watching solemnly. Behind him stood Clara, veiled and dressed in understated elegance. A widow-in-law, people had begun to call her. But the moment Axel stepped down from the podium, the cracks reappeared. "You didn't even mention how she died," Jonathan muttered as Axel passed him. Axel stiffened but kept walking. Far away in the dim quiet of Mama Aretti's hut, Olivia watched a live stream of her own funeral from a cracked tablet screen. Her fingers gripped the edge of the table. "He didn't cry," she said flatly. "Not once." Mama Aretti sat nearby, silent. He stood on a stage and painted himself a victim. It buried me with a smile. Olivia's voice grew colder. "They're applauding him." She pushed the tablet aside, rising slowly. "They think I drowned, that I'm gone." But he made one mistake. Mama Aretti looked up. "What's that, child?" Olivia's eyes glinted with new fire. "He left me breathing." That night, she pulled out every document she had sketched from memory, company records, personal contacts, security codes. She lit a lantern, leaned over the table, and whispered, "If he wanted me dead, then I'll make him wish he succeeded." Olivia stood before the full-length mirror in a small guesthouse room on the outskirts of Lagos, staring at her own reflection as though meeting a stranger. Her curls had grown fuller, her skin now carried the sun-kissed resilience of rural life. But it was her eyes that haunted her. They held a quiet fury, tempered by silence and sharpened by loss. In her hand was a yellowed newspaper clipping she had stolen from the market stand earlier that day. Widowed entrepreneur Axel Olerun claims wife's death still unbearable. Beneath the headline was a photo of Axel and Clara at a gala, smiling. Not mourning. Olivia's hands clenched the paper. "You buried me with your lies," she whispered. "Now it's my turn to dig up the truth." Behind her, the mirror reflected something else, a woman no longer broken, but becoming reborn. She took out the locket Mama Eretti had hidden among her belongings. Inside was a tiny photo of her father, the man who taught her how to fight with silence, how to listen with her eyes, how to strike when least expected. She'd grown up learning how to analyze people before trusting them, yet Axel had bypassed every guard she had. "Never again," she muttered, tying her hair into a neat bun. With trembling fingers, she applied red lipstick for the first time in years. "You wanted me erased," she said, pulling on a navy blue suit. "Instead, I'll make you remember me in every headline, every lawsuit, and every broken mirror." Olivia looked into her reflection one last time. "Olivia is gone. You'll meet Ariana now. And she doesn't forgive." Ariana arrived in Lagos like a ghost with purpose. She stepped into a world that once belonged to her, now a battlefield littered with betrayal and half-truths. But she had changed, physically and otherwise. Gone were the soft colors and floral dresses. Now she wore sharp-tailored suits, matte lipstick, and a crisp confidence that drew attention without inviting conversation. She rented a penthouse downtown under a new alias, Ms. Ariana Cole. The name was legally purchased, identity fabricated from fragments collected over months. No one suspected that the woman sitting across from Lagos's top legal consulting firm was the same woman buried 3 years ago. "You studied law abroad?" the HR manager asked. Ariana smiled, and survived shipwrecks of a different kind. Her voice was firm, measured. Within a week, she was hired as a private consultant, ironically, by the very firm that handled Axel's corporate mergers. Her first day in the glass-walled boardroom felt like walking through ash with gasoline in her hand. She walked past the front desk where she used to send Axel lunch. Now she arrived with classified case files. She took meetings on the 15th floor where her name had once been erased. The receptionist offered her water. She declined. "Stay sharp," she told herself. Her first project was reviewing merger contracts, some of which led directly to Axel's company. At night, she combed through old ledgers she memorized, cross-referencing them with new transactions. "He's laundering money through shell contracts," she muttered, jotting notes. Her phone buzzed. A private email with no sender. "We know who you are." Her breath caught, but instead of fear, she smirked. "Let them watch," she whispered. "But they won't see me coming." In a city that once mourned her, Ariana had returned, not for applause, but for a reckoning. Jonathan leaned back in his office chair, staring at the boardroom schedule email that had just popped into his inbox. A new consultant had been assigned to the case, Ariana Cole. Her name was unfamiliar, but the attached ID photo made his spine stiffen. He zoomed in then again, the cheekbones, the way her eyes narrowed slightly at the corners. The same jawline that once tilted in laughter over a dinner table at Olivia's house. "It can't be," he whispered, heart-pounding. He tried brushing it off, perhaps a distant relative or a strange coincidence. But when she walked into the boardroom, calm, composed, eyes sharp and impersonal, he knew. Olivia, or someone pretending too well to be her. He couldn't breathe. His palms were cold. When she glanced at him briefly, there was no recognition in her eyes. But his gut screamed otherwise. Later that evening, he waited at the building's parking lot, watching as she stepped into a black SUV. "Ariana," he called, voice hesitant. She turned slowly, face unreadable. "Yes, you look familiar." Her lips curled slightly. "People say that when they don't know what to say." "Do you know who I am?" he asked. She tilted her head. "Should I?" Jonathan stepped closer. "Olivia wouldn't leave without a fight. And if you are her, I think you came back for one." Her face didn't change, but something in her eyes flickered, grief, anger, a buried storm. She turned away. "Let sleeping ghosts rest, Mr. Jonathan." But as she entered the car, she whispered without looking back, "Some ghosts aren't here to rest. They're here to haunt." Jonathan stood frozen, breath shallow. There was no doubt now. She was back. And someone, no, everyone, was about to pay. Clara sat before her vanity, her perfectly shaped nails tapping against the glass in erratic rhythm. Her reflection stared back, elegant, well-dressed, and yet hollow. Axel had been avoiding her. Even though she had had everything she thought she wanted, the mansion, the cars, the marriage, there was no warmth, no celebration of their supposed victory. "Do you even see me anymore?" she snapped one night when Axel returned home and walked past her without a word. He paused, loosened his tie, and replied, "I see the consequences of my mistakes." Clara blinked. "What's that supposed to mean?" He didn't answer. That night, Clara paced the hallway like a caged animal. Her footsteps stopped at Olivia's old art studio door, now sealed shut. No one had entered since the accident. She pushed it open. The room was untouched. A single unfinished portrait sat on an easel, Olivia's self-portrait. Clara staggered back. It felt like the room was breathing. The next morning, Clara tried to shake the unease. But the world seemed to be conspiring. Her laptop pinged with a message. "Some women haunt without dying." She gasped and slammed it shut. Her eyes darted to Axel, but he was silent at the breakfast table, scrolling through company reports, jaw tight. "Are you hiding something from me?" she asked, voice rising. He looked up slowly. "No, Clara. I just don't have anything left to give you." Her hands clenched. The miscarriage still weighed on her, not just as loss, but as a reminder that Olivia had once been pregnant too, rumors she had dismissed, but now they whispered louder in her mind. Clara's insecurity grew into suspicion. She began checking Axel's calls, his texts. Each time she saw a blocked number or deleted history, she felt her stomach twist. One evening, she sat alone in the garden, staring at the waves beyond the compound. "I won," she whispered bitterly. "Why does it still feel like I lost?" Axel stumbled into his office late that night, exhausted and distracted. The tension in his shoulders never left anymore, and the smell of Clara's perfume had begun to make him nauseous. As he opened his desk drawer for a pen, he found an envelope addressed in clean block lettering. "To the man who fed the sea." His hands trembled as he tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Just one line, "Not all dead wives stay dead." His heart stopped. He looked around the empty office, expecting someone to jump out. "Who put this here?" he barked into the intercom. No answer. He rushed to check the security footage, but the recording had a mysterious 2-hour gap. "This is a sick joke," he muttered, locking the envelope in a drawer, but his hands couldn't stop shaking. That night, Axel couldn't sleep. He sat on the edge of his bed while Clara slept beside him, snoring lightly. The walls seemed to close in. He heard water dripping from the bathroom tap, but it sounded too much like waves. He stood abruptly and walked to the kitchen, pouring himself a glass of whiskey. That's when the phone rang. Unknown number. He answered, his voice hoarse. "Hello." Silence, then a low whisper. "You should have made sure I drowned." The call cut. Axel dropped the phone. "No," he said aloud, clutching his chest. "She's dead. She's dead." But even as he said it, he ran to the balcony and stared at the darkness. His breath came in gasps. Was he being watched? Haunted? He didn't know. But for the first time since Olivia vanished, Axel realized the sea may not have kept its secret. And what frightened him most was the thought that she was out there, not to cry, but to punish. Far from the chaos unraveling in Lagos, Mama Areti sat with Olivia in the quiet courtyard of their coastal refuge, the warm afternoon sun casting soft patterns through the tree leaves. Olivia clutched a faded blanket in her lap, eyes focused yet hollow. "I need to know everything," she said softly. "Even the part you're afraid I'll break over." Mama Areti hesitated, then nodded. She disappeared into the hut and returned with a small woven basket. Inside it was a soft blue cloth, a photo, and a note written in a shaky hand. "You gave birth 3 days after we pulled you from the ocean," she said, voice thick with memory. "You were unconscious. The child was taken to my cousin's care in the next town. I didn't know if you'd wake. I didn't want to risk losing him too." Olivia stared at the items, then at Mama Areti. "He's alive?" Her voice trembled. "My son, he lived?" Tears rolled silently down her cheeks as she held the photo, a chubby-cheeked boy with a slight cleft in his chin, just like hers. "His name is Elian," Mama Areti whispered. "He turned 3 last month." Olivia's fingers gripped the image. "He doesn't even know my face," she murmured. "I've missed his first smile, his first word, his first everything." The loss tore through her chest, sharper than any betrayal Axel had dealt her. Why didn't you tell me sooner? She asked, not in anger but in devastation. Mama Eretti touched her shoulder gently. You needed strength. Now you have it. Olivia rose to her feet, back straight. I want him back, she said, but not into a broken life. First, I'll fix what was taken from me. Then I'll bring my son home to a woman he can be proud of. And with that, the fire in her heart burned brighter, not just for revenge, but for legacy. The first time Olivia saw Elian, he was chasing a butterfly barefoot across a patch of sunlit grass, his laughter echoing through the trees. She stood behind a hedge, her body frozen, her soul unraveling. He was taller than she expected, with curly black hair and her exact dimples. She pressed a hand against her mouth to keep from sobbing out loud. He looks just like you, Mama Eretti murmured beside her, holding her steady. He's healthy, happy. Olivia couldn't move. She was staring at the only piece of her that had survived Axel's betrayal, the only thing she hadn't known existed during her darkest hours. When the child turned and called, Auntie Tenny, look, to the woman watching him, Olivia staggered back. He doesn't know my voice, she whispered, knees threatening to buckle. He doesn't know I'm his mother. Later that evening, they watched from the sidelines as Elian drew crayon pictures on the veranda of his foster home. Olivia clenched her fists to resist running to him. It's not time, Mama Eretti warned softly. You'll get him back, but do it right. If you rush, you risk scaring him or losing him again. Olivia nodded, eyes burning. I want him to know me not as a mystery, but as his mother. Not just the woman who returned, but the woman who fought her way back. She watched him fold his little arms in triumph after finishing his drawing. I will never let anyone take him from me again, she vowed. As she turned to leave, Elian looked up. For a fleeting moment, their eyes met, hers filled with tears, his with innocent curiosity. He tilted his head but didn't speak. Olivia smiled softly, whispering, Soon, my son, soon. Jonathan waited in the quiet courtyard of the firm's underground garage, leaning against a pillar as Ariana, no, Olivia, stepped out of the elevator. We need to talk, he said plainly, stepping into her path. She paused but didn't flinch. If it's about the quarterly report, book a meeting like everyone else, she replied coldly. He stepped closer. I know who you are. She stiffened. You're mistaken. Olivia, don't insult me, he said firmly. I've known you since before Axel had his first salary. You think I wouldn't recognize your eyes, your walk, your silence? There was a beat of silence. Olivia inhaled, then spoke low. Then you know I shouldn't be here. You know what he did. Why are you confronting me? What do you want? Jonathan's expression softened. To help you. They sat in his car, windows rolled up, tension thick. Olivia's voice trembled as she spoke. He left me to die, and she stood there, Clara. She watched. They took my home, my name, my company, and my child. Jonathan's eyes widened. You had a child, she nodded. A son. He's alive. He doesn't know me yet, but he will. Jonathan leaned forward. Tell me what you need. Access, she replied. To documents Axel buried, emails you can trace, accounts that prove he embezzled my assets. Jonathan nodded slowly. He made me his legal proxy when you vanished. I still have back-end access. Olivia's eyes filled with tears, her first in weeks. Why are you helping me? She asked. He looked at her, voice heavy. Because I stayed silent when I should have spoken up. This is how I make it right. She reached for his hand. Then let's take back everything he stole, one lie at a time. The first move was subtle. A confidential memo leaked to Axel's company board, outlining discrepancies in profit margins from 3 major clients. No one knew where it came from, but the numbers were damning. These aren't just mistakes, one board member muttered. This is manipulation. Axel, pacing his office, barked into the phone. Find the source. Find who's doing this. But the leaks kept coming, minutes from hidden meetings, forged contracts, side transactions linked to Clara's name. Soon, media outlets began sniffing around. Rumors started to bubble, fraud, misappropriation, ghost investors. Clara confronted Axel with trembling hands. Are we going to jail? He turned on her with wild eyes. You said no one would trace anything back to us. She shouted, I didn't leak a thing. But both knew someone was peeling back their empire, layer by poisonous layer. Behind it all, Olivia watched from a distance, seated at her home workspace with Jonathan beside her. You were right, he said, reviewing the server logs. Clara's name was used to sign off multiple bribes. If this hits the press, she'll be finished. Olivia's jaw tightened. That's the point. She didn't just watch me drown, she smiled. Let her feel what it's like to sink. Jonathan studied her for a moment. You've changed. I died, Jonathan, she replied. And the woman that rose didn't come back to forgive. They moved on to the next file, a damning offshore account that connected directly to Axel's name. Olivia sent it anonymously to a journalist. Let him sweat. Let him know something's coming, but not when, not how. Outside, thunder rumbled in the sky. You think they'll guess it's you? Jonathan asked. Olivia smiled coldly. Even if they do, they'll never stop it. I'm no longer playing by their rules. I'm rewriting them. Axel sat in his office long after the staff had gone home, nursing his fifth drink of the night. The days had grown heavier, like the walls were closing in. When his secretary dropped an envelope on his desk that afternoon, she'd said, "No sender." Just said it was urgent. Inside was a handwritten note, "Come alone. 9 p.m., Grand Orchid Lounge. Let's talk about the woman you fed to the sea." He'd scoffed at first, tossed it aside, then picked it up again. His hands had grown cold. The handwriting, it was unnervingly neat. His instincts said to ignore it, but his guilt said otherwise. At exactly 8:53 p.m., Axel stepped out of his black SUV, adjusted his jacket, and entered the upscale, dimly lit lounge, his eyes darting like a hunted man's. He requested a private booth. He didn't notice the woman already seated in the shadows. Olivia sat still, her face partially obscured by a wine glass and the soft glow of the candle on the table. Her hair was swept into a clean knot, and her tailored black suit echoed power and mourning. Axel didn't recognize her immediately. "Are you the one who sent the note?" he asked, standing. Her voice was ice. "Sit, Axel." His body locked. That voice, it hit like a jolt. His knees buckled slightly as he dropped into the seat across from her. "This can't be," he stammered. "You, dead," she offered. "No. Just forgotten, just thrown away." Axel's face went pale. "Olivia, don't say my name," she cut in. "You gave it a funeral." He shook his head violently, eyes brimming with disbelief. How are you alive?" She leaned closer. "The sea spared me. I came back to make sure nothing else does." Axel reached for her hand instinctively. She withdrew it sharply. "Touch me again, and I'll make this meeting the least of your regrets." Her words were calm, but her stare said war had begun. Axel's world crumbled in real time as he sat across from the woman he had buried in memory and in lies. "This is impossible," he muttered, gripping the edge of the table. "You were gone. We searched. I mourned you." Olivia gave a bitter laugh. "You replaced me in your bed before my scarf dried." Her voice was even, but her hands trembled slightly beneath the table. "You told everyone I slipped. You cried for the cameras while Clara wore my perfume in my house." Axel dropped his head in shame. "I was desperate. I didn't plan it that way." Olivia leaned forward. "Yes, you did. You planned it down to the minute. And now, I've planned this. I've taken your investors. I've exposed your secrets. I've made your walls bleed. This," she gestured around them, "is just a courtesy before the rest falls apart." Axel's voice broke. "Please, if there's any part of you that remembers loving me." Olivia slammed her palm against the table, making him flinch. "That woman drowned, Axel. You killed her." He reached for her again, this time pleading. "We can fix this. We can talk. I can." "You can rot," she whispered. "I don't want justice through the courts. I want justice through consequences. I want to watch you unravel publicly, privately, completely." His shoulders slumped. "Clara doesn't know, does she?" Olivia smirked. "She will, soon. And when she does, she'll leave you just like you left me. Only this time, you won't have the sea to cover your shame." Axel opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. She stood slowly, collected her clutch, and stared him down. This wasn't a reunion. This was a warning. "Everything you built with my blood will collapse. Sleep well if you still can." Clara opened her phone that morning to dozens of missed calls, emails, and a trending hashtag, Widow Returns. Her hands trembled as she clicked on a viral blog post headlined, "Olivia Oleron Alive, Exclusive Photo from Grand Orchid Meeting." The image was blurry but damning. Axel seated across from a woman who looked unmistakably like Olivia. Clara dropped the phone, her chest tightening. She ran barefoot down the stairs, screaming, "Axel! Axel!" He was in the study, motionless, staring at the same photo on his computer. "She's back," he said flatly. Clara's voice cracked. "You said she was dead. You said we were free." Axel looked at her, eyes hollow. "She said she wants revenge. She's not coming quietly." Clara's knees gave out, her entire body trembling. "We buried her. Oh God." She began to cry uncontrollably, pacing, pulling her hair. "Is she going to kill us?" Axel moved to her side, but Clara recoiled like he was poison. "Don't touch me. You promised me she'd never return. You said I was safe with you," she screamed. "You made me a murderer's mistress." Axel's face twisted in guilt. "We did what we had to do." Clara shook her head violently. "No, you did what you had to do. I followed you because I loved you. And now, everything is falling apart." She locked herself in the bathroom, sobbing and tearing down the mirror. "I see her everywhere," she cried. "In my dreams, in the walls, in my reflection." Axel leaned against the door. "We have to be smart. If she's back, we'll handle it." Clara's voice grew low. "You think this is still a business problem? She didn't come back for your company. She came back for your soul." And as she slid to the floor, sobbing into her knees, the truth hit her harder than any threat. Olivia hadn't come to fight. She had come to finish. The knock on the gate echoed like thunder through Mama Ayo's modest compound, where Elian had spent the last 3 years surrounded by innocence. Olivia stood with her heart beating in her throat, fingers clenched at her side. Mama already held her arm gently. "This is the moment, child. Don't let fear steal it." When the gate creaked open, Elian stood holding a toy car, his lips stained from Zobo. His eyes met Olivia's again, like at the hilltop weeks before, but this time she stepped forward. "Hello, sweetheart," she whispered. He tilted his head. "Are you the lady from the butterfly place?" Olivia's knees nearly gave way. She nodded, crouching to his level. "Yes, baby, I came back for you." Mama Ayo stepped out, brows furrowed. Olivia rose. "I'm his mother, and I'm here to take him home." Silence stretched as the two women stared at each other, truth balanced on the edge of tears. The handover wasn't easy. There were questions, legal paperwork, tears from Mama Ayo, who had loved Elian like her own. But Olivia handled it with grace, with dignity. "I will never forget what you've done for him," she said, hugging the woman tightly. That evening, back in her own apartment, Olivia sat on the floor with Elian curled beside her, watching animated rhymes on a tablet. He laughed, and the sound broke her. "I missed everything," she whispered, brushing his curls. "But I'll be here for everything that comes next." Elian looked up. "Can I call you Mummy?" Olivia's breath caught. She nodded, tears falling freely. "Yes, baby, you can call me that forever." She kissed his forehead. In that moment, revenge took a back seat. For a breath of peace, for this tiny heartbeat she had created, Olivia remembered what it felt like to win not just battles, but to reclaim what truly mattered. The television buzzed inside cafes, salons, and taxis across the nation. Breaking news. Billionaire's widow, declared dead returns alive, speaks out. The clip showed Olivia seated in a soft-lit studio, poised and elegant in a navy blue dress. Her voice was calm, but her words were fire. "I was pushed, I was left to die. I survived, and now I refuse to be silent." The host blinked, stunned. "You're saying your husband attempted murder?" Olivia gave a soft, chilling smile. "He did more than attempt it. He built his fortune on my silence. But I'm here now, and I'm not leaving again." The clip went viral in minutes. Hashtags trended globally. Women rallied. News stations replayed the interview every hour. Axel's company stock plummeted by noon. Anonymous employees started leaking internal documents. Olivia's voice wasn't just heard, it was shaking empires. In their mansion, Axel and Clara watched the screen in silence, the light from the TV casting a pale glow on their stricken faces. Clara was the first to speak. "You said she was finished." Axel didn't answer. He reached for the remote with a shaking hand, turning off the screen. "She's not doing this alone," he muttered. "Someone is feeding her intel." Clara stood. "It doesn't matter who. The whole country believes her. They want your head on a plate, and mine too." Axel turned to her sharply. "Then help me fix it." Clara's eyes narrowed. "Fix it? We can't fix this. She didn't come back for justice, Axel. She came back to make sure we're remembered as villains." She walked out, slamming the door. Alone, Axel stared at the darkened TV, the echo of Olivia's final interview words looping in his head. You thought the sea took me, but it gave me back with fire in my bones. The knock at the front door wasn't loud, but it felt like a bomb had dropped. Axel was in the study, pacing and muttering to himself, while Clara sat in the corner with a cigarette she hadn't lit, just holding it between trembling fingers. A voice echoed from the corridor. Mr. Axel Oleron opened the door. This is the Nigerian police force. We have a warrant for your arrest. Clara gasped, rising to her feet. What did you do? What did you hide? Axel backed away from the door like a man facing a firing squad. They won't take me, he murmured. They can't. But the banging grew louder. Step aside, sir. You are wanted for attempted murder, fraud, falsification of documents, and obstruction of justice. The color drained from Clara's face. Attempted murder, she whispered. You didn't just let her fall. You planned it? Axel didn't deny it. When the officers burst through, Axel resisted. Papers scattered, Clara screamed. But in minutes, he was cuffed, his head bowed. Outside, the cameras were already waiting. Reporters shouted questions as flashbulbs lit up the early morning haze. Olivia watched it all from her window, Ilian asleep on her lap. She didn't smile. There was no pleasure in seeing the man who once swore to protect her dragged like a criminal. There was only closure. A knock came at her own door. Jonathan stood there, holding up a file. It's done. You're cleared of everything. The court reinstated your legal ownership. Olivia nodded. Good. But this isn't just about reclaiming assets, Jonathan. This is about reclaiming my life. She looked down at her sleeping son, then back out at the street where Axel had vanished into the black police van. Let them know, she said quietly. This isn't the end. This is only the reckoning. The interrogation room was cold and colorless, its walls suffocatingly quiet except for the ticking of a cheap wall clock. Clara sat across from the lead investigator, her face pale, makeup smudged, eyes rimmed red. You understand you are under investigation for conspiracy and accessory to attempted murder, the officer stated, sliding a recorder toward her. Clara didn't flinch. She stared at the table, her voice barely a whisper. He told me it was an accident. At first. But when the headlines faded and he didn't grieve, I knew. I knew the sea didn't take her, he did. The officer leaned in. Did you help him cover it up? Clara exhaled sharply. Yes, I helped burn her clothes. I watched him replace her. I played the grieving lover when I should have screamed. I thought it meant we'd finally be free. Her voice cracked. But I was just his accomplice. I was never his equal. The confession poured out like poison from a burst vein. Clara named the dates, the fake documents, even the private security firm that helped forge the death declaration. Why confess now? The officer asked. She looked up for the first time. Because I see her everywhere, not just on TV. In my sleep, in the corners of the room. Olivia's not just alive, she's winning. And she paused, trembling. I can't live with this anymore. That afternoon, her statement went public. Clara was moved to a psychiatric facility for evaluation after an emotional breakdown in her holding cell. Olivia read the news on her tablet, her expression unreadable. Jonathan set it down gently. She cracked. Olivia nodded. She thought she was strong enough to stand beside him, but she was only ever strong enough to fall with him. And for the first time, Olivia allowed herself a long, deep breath, not of victory, but of release. The boardroom was tense as the directors of Oleron Enterprises gathered for the emergency shareholders meeting. Rumors had swirled for weeks, and today the storm finally broke. The elevator chimed, and every head turned as Olivia stepped into the room in a fitted white suit, Ilian's small hand in hers and Jonathan at her side. She walked straight to the head of the table and placed a thick file before the chairman. As of this morning, she said calmly, the court has reinstated my legal authority as primary owner and founder. I am here to reclaim what I built. Murmurs echoed. One board member asked, and if we resist? Olivia's gaze was sharp. Then your names will be in the next batch of evidence. Choose wisely. She didn't raise her voice, but power pulsed with every syllable. She sat at the head seat, her son beside her, his crayons spread across a notepad while she flipped open the company's financial projections. This place has bled long enough, she said, addressing the stunned room. You handed my legacy to a man who tried to kill me. Now I will resurrect it on my terms. Jonathan handed out new management protocols. Heads bowed. No one argued. When the meeting ended, the applause wasn't loud, but it was real. Olivia walked out to the top-floor balcony, Elian in her arms. "Mummy, is this your house now?" he asked. She kissed his forehead. "No, baby, it was always mine. They just forgot." The wind brushed her cheeks like a quiet amen. For the first time in years, she looked out at Lagos, not as a ghost returning, but as a woman who had risen. The prison mailroom smelled of rust and damp paper. Axel sat on his bunk, staring at the ceiling when a guard handed him a cream-colored envelope. The handwriting made his stomach churn. It was unmistakably Olivia's. He tore it open with shaking hands. Inside was a single page, no greeting, no sentiment. "You once wrote me letters full of love. Now you write statements full of lies. This is the last thing you'll ever receive from me. Not because I hate you, but because I've stopped needing to be understood by a man who threw me to drown." Axel stared at the words until his vision blurred. Beneath the signature line, she had written simply, "I survived. You didn't." He clutched the letter until the edges crumpled. Around him, other inmates called out, laughing, shouting, but he didn't hear them. All he heard was silence, the same silence that haunted him in his cell at night. He read the letter again, hoping for a loophole, a softness, a sign that the woman he once married still existed. But it was final, cold, freeing for her, not him. Axel buried his face in his hands, shaking not from guilt alone, but from the terrifying truth that he had lost the only thing that ever humanized him. The guard returned. "You done?" Axel nodded weakly and handed back the envelope. But long after the paper left his hands, the weight of her words remained like a chain. Olivia had spoken, and in that final note she had sentenced him to the one punishment prison couldn't deliver, being forgotten by the woman he once believed he could destroy. The crowd gathered in a modern event space overlooking the Lagos skyline. Inside, a private roundtable of influential women, lawyers, and entrepreneurs sat listening as Olivia addressed them, not as a victim, but as a visionary. "This," she said, holding up a folder, "is not just a story of survival. It's proof that silence does not protect you. Power does. And sometimes you have to build it from the ashes they left you in." The room was silent, eyes fixed on her. She wore a soft emerald gown and gold earrings, her hair in long waves that moved with each word. Seated beside her, Elian clapped along when the audience erupted into applause. Olivia turned to him and smiled. "Everything I do now," she whispered, "is so you never have to wonder what strength looks like." He looked up at her and nodded. "You look like a queen, Mummy." After the event, reporters clamored for interviews, but Olivia waved them off politely. Her voice now belonged to the causes she chose, not the headlines. She had launched an elite mentorship collective for women rebuilding their lives after betrayal, not a charity, but a movement. "We're not collecting sympathy," she told a young woman who approached her in tears. "We're collecting tools, strategies, and truth." Later that evening, Jonathan walked her to her car. "You've changed the entire narrative," he said. "You didn't just return, you rewrote your ending." Olivia placed her hand on his. "Because I refused to let them define it." She paused, then added, "And thank you, Jonathan. You didn't just help me win. You helped me remember I was worth the fight." As the city lights twinkled behind her, Olivia knew one thing for certain. This was no longer about revenge. This was her rebirth. 3 years to the day since she was pushed into the water, Olivia returned to the same dock, this time not in fear, but in finality. The ocean roared quietly beside her as she stood at the edge, dressed in all white, Elian's small hand tucked securely in hers. "This is where it happened?" he asked softly. She nodded, her gaze focused on the waves. "Yes, but it doesn't own me anymore." Elian stared out thoughtfully, then said, "Does the sea still scare you?" She kneeled beside him. "No, it tried to take me. But it taught me something instead." He tilted his head. "What did it teach you?" Olivia smiled. "That drowning isn't the end. It's just a pause before the rise." She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and whispered into the wind. "You thought you buried me, Axel. But the sea didn't keep me. It cleansed me." She let go of a tiny wooden sculpture she and Elian had made, an emblem of freedom, and watched it float away. The sky was painted in orange hues, the waves soft and rhythmic, like an old lullaby. Olivia stood tall, hands still in her son's, and turned her back on the water that once betrayed her. "Let's go," she said. There's nothing left for us here. As they walked away, the camera of the world faded behind her, and what remained was not a woman undone, but a mother, a warrior, and a survivor whose name would never again be silenced. Because the sea didn't take her, it baptized her, and in her walk away from it, she reclaimed not just her life, but her legacy. Isaiah 61 verse 7. Instead of your shame, you will receive a double portion, and instead of disgrace, you will rejoice in your inheritance. And so you will inherit a double portion in your land, and everlasting joy will be yours. Reflection. Just as Olivia was stripped of everything, her dignity, her name, her family, God turned her mourning into strength, her betrayal into wisdom, and her silence into power. Her double portion wasn't just the return of her son or company, but the rise of a legacy that couldn't be drowned by evil. Moral of the story. True strength is not in survival alone, but in how you rise after betrayal and in choosing healing over hate. This story teaches that betrayal may bury you, but it cannot define you, especially when your will to rise is stronger than their desire to silence you. Revenge is most powerful when it is dressed in dignity, truth, and purpose, not rage. A woman who finds herself again becomes unstoppable, especially when her comeback is rooted in reclaiming her identity, protecting her child, and restoring what was stolen with grace, not bitterness. And finally, those who plot evil may escape for a season, but truth, like the tide, always returns. That's the end of the story. What did you learn from this story? Drop your thoughts in the comment section. Leave a like and don't forget to subscribe and turn on post notification so that you'll be notified whenever we drop our next videos. Also, share this video to someone who might be interested. Thank you so much for watching.